What if I told you we're making cupcakes so decadent they'll steal the show at any dessert table? Think rich chocolate cupcakes filled with sweet strawberry goodness, topped with fluffy strawberry buttercream, and finished with mini chocolate bars. Sounds irresistible, right? Let's dive in and create these show-stopping treats together. I start with adorable mini chocolate bars. First, I melt 1 cup of Wilton Dark cocoa candy melts with 1/4 teaspoon of coconut oil in a candy melt pot. Next, I stir the mixture until it's smooth and velvety. Then, I pour the melted chocolate into silicone molds. I gently tap the molds on the counter to get rid of any air bubbles. A little trick for flawless chocolates. Once that's done, I pop the molds in the freezer for about 10 minutes to harden. Did you know cupcakes started as a way to make baking easier and faster? It's true. Back in the 19th century, people were looking for quicker ways to whip up small cakes. They started baking them in individual molds or teacups, hence the name cupcake. Genius, right? These little cakes cooked evenly and way faster than big ones, making them an instant hit. The name wasn't just about the cups, though. Early recipes called for unique ingredients measured by the cup. 1 cup of butter, 2 cups of sugar, 3 cups of flour, and so on. It was like a baking cheat sheet you couldn't mess up, perfect for anyone who's ever been stumped by complicated recipes. Fast forward to the 20th century, and cupcake liners made their debut. Suddenly, cupcakes became prettier and easier to handle, which just added to their charm. By the 21st century, they were a full-blown phenomenon. Bakeries, TV shows, and even cupcake wars turned these humble treats into edible works of art. Now, cupcakes are the life of the party. From birthdays to weddings, they bring a little joy wherever they go. And with endless flavor combos and decorations, they're the perfect canvas for baking creativity. So, next time you bite into a cupcake, remember, you're tasting a piece of baking history. While those set, I melt 1/2 cup of pink Wilton candy melts with 1/2 teaspoon of coconut oil in a clean pot. After the chocolates are ready, I drizzle the pink chocolate over the bars for a decorative touch. Finally, I sprinkle the bars with tutu sweet sprinkles to add a pop of color and texture. It's such a simple touch, but it adds so much flair. Freeze the bars again until the drizzle hardens completely. Here's my tip: make extras. These little bars are not just for decorating. They're also the perfect snack while you're working. Just keep in mind, they're sensitive to heat. So I store any extras in an airtight container in the fridge to keep them from melting or losing their shape. If you don't have a candy melt pot, no worries. I have another video where I show you how to melt chocolate using alternative methods. It's super easy and just as effective. I hope you're loving the process of making these chocolate strawberry cupcakes as much as I do. If you're enjoying this recipe, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss any of my baking adventures. Do you have a favorite cupcake recipe or a unique dessert idea that you love to make? Maybe a family recipe or a fun twist you've discovered. I'd absolutely love for you to share it with me in the comments below. Let's swap ideas and keep the baking inspiration flowing. Here on my channel, I combine my love of food photography and baking, inviting you into my kitchen to share in the joy of creating amazing desserts. From capturing perfect frosting swirls to sharing sweet, irresistible recipes, I hope you feel inspired to bake something truly wonderful. Thanks for joining me on this chocolate strawberry adventure. Let's frost those cupcakes and indulge in the deliciousness. Alright, first things first, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and get your ingredients ready. I'm a big fan of prepping everything ahead of time. It makes the whole process so much smoother. Trust me, you'll thank yourself later. In a large bowl, I start by adding 1 cup of all-purpose flour. This is the foundation for our cupcakes, so make sure it's fresh and fluffy. Next, I add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Just a pinch, but it's the unsung hero that enhances all the other flavors. Then I measure out and whisk in 1 teaspoon of baking powder. This gives our cupcakes a nice lift. I follow that with 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. It's the perfect partner to the baking powder for achieving that soft, airy texture. Now it's time for the sweetness. 1 cup of granulated sugar goes in. It's the magic ingredient that makes everything taste like dessert. Finally, I add in 1/2 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder. Here's a tip. I whisk everything together with a hand whisk to keep it quick and simple. But if you're worried about lumps in the cocoa powder, you can sift it too. Sifting is a great option to ensure a perfectly smooth batter. And trust me, nobody wants a surprise clump of cocoa in their cupcake. Now, in a separate large bowl, whisk together the wet ingredients. I start by cracking 2 large eggs into the bowl. Room temperature eggs work best here to ensure a smooth and even batter. Next, I pour in 1/2 cup of buttermilk. It's my go-to secret for moist and tender cupcakes. If you're out of buttermilk, just mix regular milk with a splash of vinegar or lemon juice and let it sit for a few minutes. Instant buttermilk. Then, I add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. This brings a warm, aromatic touch that enhances all the other flavors beautifully. Finally, I measure out 1/3 cup of vegetable oil and whisk it in. The oil keeps the cupcakes moist and gives them a soft, light texture. I whisk all the wet ingredients together thoroughly, ensuring everything is beautifully combined. This step is crucial for creating a smooth and consistent batter. By taking a few moments here, I make sure there are no pockets of unincorporated ingredients, setting the stage for perfectly moist and fluffy cupcakes. Slowly add the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients, a little at a time, and mix until just combined. I like to use my large hand whisk for this step, as it gives me great control and keeps everything smooth. However, you can absolutely use a hand mixer or a standing mixer if that's your preference. Be gentle here. Overmixing can make your cupcakes dense. The batter should be smooth and luscious. Grab your muffin pan lined with those beautiful gold foil cupcake liners. I personally love using these liners because they don't absorb oil like paper ones, keeping your cupcakes looking shiny and elegant. Plus, they make cleanup a breeze, a win-win in my book. I like to use a dough scoop to get even portions. It's my secret weapon for perfect cupcakes every time. Fill each liner about 2/3 full and pop the tray into the oven. Let me share a few tricks I've learned from baking cupcakes at high altitude. It's a whole different game up here. First, I dial back the baking powder by about 1/4 teaspoon. Why? Too much leavening can make the cupcakes rise too fast and then collapse. Nobody wants that, right? Next, I add an extra tablespoon of flour to give the batter some extra stability. Think of it as a safety net for your cupcakes. Since the dry air at high altitude can suck the moisture right out, I also mix in an extra tablespoon or 2 of buttermilk. It's my secret weapon for keeping those cupcakes soft and tender. Oh, and baking time? Watch it like a hawk. Things bake faster up here, so I start checking a few minutes early to avoid any overbaking disasters. These little tweaks have saved me from so many oops moments in the kitchen. Bake for 18 to 20 minutes or until a toothpick inserted in the center comes out clean. Be sure to place the baking pan on the middle rack in the middle of the oven for even baking. Once they're done, transfer them to a drying rack to cool completely. And here's a pro tip. Don't even think about frosting warm cupcakes. The frosting will melt and you'll have a gooey mess on your hands. While the cupcakes are cooling, let's shift our focus to the highlight of this recipe, that dreamy strawberry buttercream. Trust me, this frosting is so good, you might end up taste testing more than you planned. Made with fresh strawberries, it's packed with vibrant flavor and natural sweetness. In no time, we'll whip it into the fluffiest, creamiest frosting that's going to take these cupcakes to the next level of deliciousness. I start by preparing 1.5 cups of fresh strawberries. First, wash the strawberries thoroughly to remove any dirt or residue. Then remove the stems and slice them thinly for easier blending. If you're like me, feel free to sneak a bite. The fresher, the better. Fresh strawberries are key here because their vibrant flavor and natural sweetness truly make this frosting shine. Once sliced, transfer the strawberries to a blender and blend until completely smooth. If you notice any stubborn chunks, use a silicone spatula to scrape down the sides of the blender and give it another whirl. Once blended, set the puree aside for later use. It's like bottling up summer sunshine to add to your frosting. Here's a tip. If your strawberries are particularly juicy, you can strain the puree through a fine mesh sieve for a smoother texture. Personally, I love keeping all the natural strawberry goodness intact for maximum flavor. If you're in a pinch, you can also use freeze-dried or frozen strawberries as an alternative. For freeze-dried strawberries, use about 1/2 cup and blend them into a fine powder to mix directly into the frosting for a burst of flavor and color. For frozen strawberries, measure out 1.5 cups thaw, and drain them thoroughly, and then puree them just like fresh ones. Just be sure to remove any excess liquid to prevent the frosting from getting too thin. Now it's time to work on the buttercream base. First, I transfer 1 cup of room temperature butter to my large mixing bowl. I set up my trusty KitchenAid stand mixer with the whisk attachment. If you're using a hand mixer, that works just as well. I start by beating the butter on medium speed until it's smooth and creamy, then increase to high for a final whip to make it extra fluffy. Don't forget to scrape the butter from the sides of the bowl with a silicone spatula to make sure everything is evenly whipped. This step is so satisfying because it sets the foundation for a fluffy, dreamy frosting. Let's talk tools for a second. I'm using a KitchenAid stand mixer, a glass mixing bowl, silicone spatulas, and a blender for this recipe. These tools make everything smoother and more efficient, like having a kitchen dream team. But honestly, don't stress if you don't have the exact same setup. A hand mixer or even a trusty whisk can get the job done. Baking is all about improvising, enjoying the process, and maybe getting a little messy along the way. Because let's face it, powdered sugar explosions are practically a rite of passage. Once the butter is perfectly whipped, I start by adding 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. This step adds a warm, aromatic touch to the frosting and helps the flavors shine through. Then, I slowly incorporate 3.5 cups of powdered sugar, 1 cup at a time. This gradual process ensures the sugar blends smoothly and prevents clumps, giving the frosting a velvety texture. I slowly start incorporating it, mixing well between each addition. Mix on low speed first, since right now we just want the ingredients to come together peacefully, unless you want your kitchen to look like a powdered sugar blizzard. Been there, not fun. Let's talk storage for this luscious strawberry buttercream frosting. On the counter, it's best to keep the frosting for no more than 1 to 2 hours, especially if your kitchen is warm. For longer storage, transfer the frosting to an airtight container and place it in the fridge. It'll stay fresh for up to a week. If you're planning ahead, you can even freeze it. Scoop the frosting into a freezer-safe bag or container, removing as much air as possible. Before sealing the bag, I like to label it with a Sharpie, noting the date and what's inside. Trust me, this small step is a lifesaver when your freezer starts looking like a treasure hunt. It'll keep in the freezer for up to 3 months. When you're ready to use the frosting after freezing, simply thaw it overnight in the fridge. Once it's thawed, let it come to room temperature. Remember, the butter in the frosting needs time to soften for the best texture. Then give it a quick whip with a mixer to bring back its creamy, fluffy texture. It'll be as good as new, ready to spread or pipe onto your desserts. Now comes the exciting part, incorporating the fresh strawberry puree. This is where the frosting gets its gorgeous pink hue and that irresistible berry flavor. I start by adding the strawberry puree slowly, alternating with the powdered sugar. Mixing on low speed ensures the ingredients blend together smoothly without overmixing or making the frosting too runny. Adding too much puree at once can make the frosting too thin. You'll want to stop adding puree once the frosting reaches your desired flavor and consistency. If the frosting starts looking a little too soft, simply mix in a bit more powdered sugar until it's back to a pipeable texture. After all the ingredients are combined, I turn my mixer on high for 8 to 10 minutes. The frosting is ready. When stiff peaks form on the tip of the whisk, it should hold its shape but still be light and airy. And let me tell you, the smell at this point, absolute heaven. When I mix in the powdered sugar and strawberry puree, I take my time and mix well between each addition. This is so important because it helps the frosting turn out smooth and even. Trust me, if you dump all the sugar in at once, you're asking for trouble. Clumps, lumps, and a frustrating mess to fix. Plus, taking it slow keeps the mixer from puffing out a cloud of powdered sugar. Been there, done that, don't recommend. By adding it gradually, I can also keep an eye on the texture and sweetness, making sure the frosting is just right. You know what's cool about strawberries? Their peak season in the USA is usually from April to June, but it depends on where you are. California grows about 90% of the nation's strawberries. Crazy, right? Florida is another big player, especially in the winter, and up in Oregon and Washington. They're famous for those super sweet and juicy summer strawberries. Here's something fun. Strawberries can taste a little different depending on where they're grown. California berries tend to be larger and firm with mild sweetness, making them great for shipping and snacking. Florida strawberries are often smaller and have a tart edge that's perfect for desserts. And those summer berries from Oregon and Washington, they're known for being super sweet and soft, almost like nature's candy. It's amazing how much the region can influence the flavor. Oh, and here's a fun little nugget. Strawberries love well-drained soil and lots of sunshine, which is why they thrive in those places. And get this, the average American eats around 8 pounds of strawberries a year. I mean, who can blame us? They're so good. If your frosting is too runny, don't panic. Start by adding a little more powdered sugar, about 1/4 cup at a time, and mixing until the frosting thickens to the desired consistency. Be careful not to add too much at once, as it can make the frosting overly sweet. On the flip side, if the frosting is too thick and feels difficult to spread or pipe, try adding a teaspoon of milk or heavy cream at a time. Mix thoroughly after each addition until it loosens up to the perfect texture. Here's a pro tip. If the frosting becomes too warm and starts to lose its shape, pop it in the fridge for 10 to 15 minutes to firm up. This helps bring everything back together without overmixing. Once the frosting is ready, I transfer it to a pastry piping bag. I like to use larger 21-inch bags because they give me more room to work with. If the bag ends up being too long, I simply cut off the extra at the end. Easy fix and no hassle. After closing the bag, make sure it's secure and ready for piping to avoid any frosting surprises. This step always feels like the calm before the creative storm. I gently pipe the frosting onto cupcakes, swirling it into those iconic peaks. And if you're decorating a cake, smooth it over the layers for a stunning finish. To make these treats even more eye-catching, I love adding a little garnish. You can use leftover whole strawberries, sliced berries, or even a sprinkle of powdered sugar for that wow factor. It's the little details that make a big difference. Let me share a little personal trick I've picked up over the years for piping buttercream without creating chaos in the kitchen. First, I always hold the piping bag at the top with one hand to apply steady pressure. My other hand stays near the tip, guiding the flow of frosting for that perfect control. Here's the real game changer. Keep one hand at the very end of the bag, twisting it tightly to maintain tension. Trust me, this little trick is a lifesaver. Nobody wants a buttercream explosion to turn their piping session into a frosting fiasco. When you're ready to pipe, work in smooth, consistent motions. Start from the outside and swirl your way inward, lifting slightly at the end for those picture-perfect peaks. If you need to pause, release the pressure gently to avoid those awkward blobs that scream, "Oops!" And remember, practice makes perfect. If things get a bit messy, just call it a taste testing session. After all, The best part of frosting is sneaking a little extra. All right, let me walk you through how I bring everything together. First, I place a cupcake on a large cutting board to get started. I grab my piping bag and fill it with 1 cup of strawberry cake filling. This step is my favorite. There's something so satisfying about knowing each cupcake will have a little surprise inside. Using an apple corer, I carefully scoop out the center of each cupcake. Don't toss those cake bits. We'll use them in just a bit to cover up the filling. I love how this step not only adds a fun surprise inside, but also keeps the cupcake perfectly intact. Next, I pipe a small amount of strawberry cake, filling into each cupcake center, making sure to fill them just enough for that burst of flavor in every bite. Once that's done, I gently place the reserved cake bits back on top to seal in all that sweet goodness, ensuring the filling stays right where it belongs. Now it's time for the frosting. I grab my piping bag filled with that dreamy strawberry buttercream. To get those big, beautiful swirls, I use a jumbo piping tip. Here's a personal trick I swear by. Hold the piping bag at the very top and twist it tightly to keep the frosting from sneaking out the back. Start piping from the outside of the cupcake and swirl your way in, lifting slightly at the end to create that perfect peak. To finish, I top each cupcake with one of those mini chocolate bars we made earlier. And just like that, you have stunning cupcakes that taste even better than they look. I'm gifting these cupcakes, so I'll be packaging them in my favorite white paper boxes with a clear window. These boxes have become my go-to after years of baking adventures. They're budget-friendly, super presentable, and work perfectly for any holiday or event. Just add a colorful ribbon or a festive tag, and you've got a thoughtful, professional-looking gift that's sure to impress. Here's why I love them so much. Unlike flimsy plastic or oversized tins, these boxes are the perfect size for keeping cupcakes safe and secure without taking up too much space. Plus, they let the beauty of your decorated cupcakes shine through, like a little dessert display case. Honestly, they're so versatile, I keep a stash on hand year-round. Whether it's Christmas, birthdays, or just a random act of kindness, these boxes never fail to make my bakes look as special as they taste. And there you have it, friends. These chocolate strawberry cupcakes are rich, flavorful, and absolutely stunning. A true showstopper for any occasion. Whether it's a birthday, a celebration, or just a regular Tuesday that needs a little sweetness, these cupcakes are sure to impress. If you give this recipe a try, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your delicious creations. And before you go, make sure to check out my next video where I'll show you how to make chocolate-covered strawberries, the perfect complement to these cupcakes. See you there for more sweet inspiration.